What's up everyone, Bradley Jack Design here with another design breakdown. This time we're going to take a look at this AJ Green graphic I made before the year started. So what we have here, it's a pretty simple design. We've got big AJ Green in the back, little guy in the front. We've got a little bit of a city here, we've got some texture going on, some stuff going on in the background and some text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just hide everything here and we can just break everything down so you can see what it took to create this design in whole. So first things first, I've got my background here. Let's turn this off. So we got a white layer. On top of that, I just have this paper texture I have. So it's just this piece of paper. I have that set to multiply with a gradient map on top of it to turn it black and white. I probably didn't tweak the gradient map much, didn't do it at all. Just made it black and white. And then on top of that, I put a giant cropped version of the Bengals logo. So this is just the Bengals logo. And I just blew it up huge. And I put it in after the fact, so I knew the eyes would be up here. That's why I have it positioned in such a way. I just wanted it in there to be some background texture to contrast with what we have in the front. I then have a gradient map on top of that, but this is a gradient map smart object. It's actually that same background with a gradient map applied to it, but it's inverted. And essentially what that's going to give us is it's going to give us a lot of these whites that are the black areas of this. So it's putting texture on this black instead of putting texture on the white. So I wanted to have more texture on that so it wasn't just black. So on top of that, I have this stripe layer here. So what I did was I took a photo I had of some paper. I don't have it up. And what I did was I used a gradient map and I made it super heavy contrast. So everything you see right here that's orange at one point was actually white. So what that allows me to do is I use that, I turned it into a selection, which is not showing up anymore, which is fun. And then I basically masked this whole group to that selection. So it's giving me this nice rough edge. It's giving me something that's a lot more interesting than just like a rectangle. So this has some rips in it. It's not giving you the sort of generic paper vibe. It's giving sort of a print stamp vibe to it, or yeah, a printed effect on it. So on top of that, I have this photo of some stripes from a tiger that I have a levels layer on to darken up. So I've just got basically some dark stripes with some of the fur, and I have that set to multiply. And then below that, I actually have just a shadow of that. So I took this shape, made it into a smart object. You know, it's just this shape, just made it gray. And then I just have it blurred underneath, set to multiply, just to give this a little bit more depth. So this looks like it's floating on top of this bottom layer. On top of that, I have this big, huge photo of AJ Green. And I have all of these, the next couple folders I have are all going to be pretty much clipped or cropped to the orange background here. So that's just holding down the Option key and applying the same mask to this group. And then I erased a little bit of it up here so his head wasn't being masked completely. So I want to show you what I did to do this effect on AJ. So I actually have the smart object open here already, where you can see we have this photo of AJ Green with some layers on top of it. This is actually a smart object, which is here, and this is the initial image. So this is the initial image we have. This is a great image, which is why I used it. Nice high quality image. So the initial edits I did were I did an unsharp mask and a camera raw filter, and I did a channel mixer and hue saturation layer. So this is actually just my standard action I use on pretty much all of my images, just as I use as a base. And those are the actions that are available on my website, available on Creative Market. If you go to them, it's actually, I think BJD2 is what it's called. So I applied those, that action to this. I have a curves layer to brighten up his eyes a little bit. You can see this brightens his eyes up, and this is just a curves layer. I just bumped up everything and then painted it on where the whites of his eyes were. And then I used a hue and saturation layer and just have it set down to 0 with the same mask, so I can make his eyes white and not so yellow. So you can see before and after. And then I have a little bit of a selective color layer on here that you can see is boosting the reds. So if we open up and take a look at this selective color layer here, we took down some cyan, we took down a little bit of the magenta and added some yellow and added some black, and that gave us this effect. I might have tweaked the yellows. I tweaked the yellows pretty much the same. And if you see what it does is it's really pulling out some orange from this skin color, which is what I wanted to do because I wanted to accentuate a lot of orange in this graphic. So I saved that, put it in the file, and then I did some other edits, which are these here. And oh, hold on, gotta turn the clip back on. So I have it clipped. So now we have this graphic here. Now I did all of these edits I'm going to show you in here, but I saved this as a smart object, and I don't know why. Usually I do that if I apply another layer to it, but it doesn't look like I did. So we're gonna hop in here and see what I did. So first things first, looks like I sharpened it again. I use an unsharp mask. Settings I use usually are 50, 2.5, and 0, or 1. You can play around with settings to see what works for you. And then basically what I wanted to do is brighten up the outside of him, so he has sort of this little bit of a glow going around him. And then I darkened up his face and lightened up his face in certain areas. So for this one, I lightened up parts of his face. For this one, I lightened up highlights of his face. So you can see some of the highlights in his face I lightened up. This one, I was lightening up the darker areas of his face. This here, I was fixing some of his beard. So you can see here from where we clipped it. It must have looked funky on top of that layer. And actually, you see this is bleeding over from the other file. So if I actually go like that, that's probably gonna be a little bit more accurate. And then I have these 3 layers that are all the same, and they're all different selections of his face. So there's a couple of different ways you can do this, and this isn't actually how the way I would do this now. I keep learning different techniques to do things. So this is actually I held down the Option key and I clicked on the clip here to get a selection, and then I went to Filter, and actually I'm going to do this a little bit better. So highlight it, go to Select, Modify, Contract. I'm going to do 4 pixels, see what that looks like. So we contracted 4 pixels. So I'm going to then mask this curve to those 4 pixels. And you can see now it's highlighting everything inside. I don't want that, I want to invert that. And then I'm just going to feather it. So if you click on this part of the curves, it shows you this, but if you click on the mask, you can change the mask settings. So I'm going to hit 8 and change that, and I'm going to apply this to each of these and turn these on. And I'm going to basically ramp up the feather on these each time. So I'm going to do 12, and then I'm going to do, I don't know, 16. And that's just highlighting the outside of his face from where like this, where light would be coming from. And it makes more sense once I have all the overlays on top of it. So I have that layer here. So also in this layer, I have a couple other layers. I've got one photo, and this is why I turned it into a smart object. Now I see. So I've got one photo of him, which is just a blurred layer. And then I have this layer set to screen. And then I masked in certain parts of this layer with a blend if applied to it, which is basically just taking down, I don't know why the blend if is applied. Oh, here it is. Yeah, I can see it now. So I took the rightmost tab from the darks and I drug it all the way over. So it's not affecting a lot of the darks, it's only affecting a lot of the lights. So you can see it's basically shining on the left side of it, or the right side, his left side of his face, but I also masked that in. And then took a new group, selected with the Option key, clicked on this layer, masked it to the group. Then I have 3 layers of color. using the same mask that I used to just highlight parts of his face. And these are just going to turn his face slightly green, slightly orange. So you see he's got this big white light on his face. Well, I wanted that to look orange. So I have a layer that's set to overlay. I have a layer set to color. And I have the top layer set to overlay again. And you can see it's turning that white into orange. So in the end, when we have this light shining that's orange, it's making his face actually look orange. Then on top of all of this, I have two layers using the same mask here. And to select the same mask, you can just hold down the option and click on the mask, and you can see where it's applied. So it's applied a little bit to his eye here, and then all this side of his face. And I have a selective color and a vibrance channel on here. So the selective color, I'm taking the reds and boosting them. And this is just playing around to see what looks good. And then I have a vibrance channel where I just turn the vibrance and saturation up just to boost it. You see, it's just boosts the saturation a little bit. So that is the big AJ Green head we have. And then I have another layer on top of this. Okay, that makes sense. Which is basically masked to just his jacket, the background. So it's sort of like the background's going through it, but it's the same background pattern. And it's the same grade, so it got a gradient map on top of it, and this is set to screen. And it's basically just giving a little bit more contrast, or a little bit more, it's a little bit more interesting than just his jacket. And then on top of that, I have this layer here, which are these top stripes, and that's why I put this on there. So I've got this top layer where stripes are going across his body. So it's sort of like he's blending into the background once you get to his neck. And this is just a masked layer set to multiply with a levels layer and a gradient map on it to turn it black and white and to darken the blacks more. And the way I cropped this, or I just masked it normally. I thought I might have done something different with the mask there. So now we've got the start of what our graphic is. We've got the background with the Bengal. We've got the Bengal tiger texture. We've got this nice big photo of AJ Green. We need something to contrast with him in the front. So we have this photo of AJ Green running. And for this, I probably did the same edits that I do on all of my photos that I use. So I didn't even use the yellow fix on this one. So I used BJD2, which unsharpened mask, camera raw settings, channel mixer, hue and saturation. And then the only other things I did was I added a curves layer, which what I did was I took the curves and I took this middle eyedropper tool to select the gray point, and I just clicked on his pants, or I clicked on his jersey to basically get rid of this color cast. So you see how this is very blue and cold. I wanted to change that. So what you can do is you can select something that's supposed to be gray. So this is black, this is sort of supposed to be gray. Maybe you click here in the letters, and what it does is it takes away a lot of the color cast. So it was a cold color cast, and I have a warm graphic, so I wanted to make sure it was a warmer color than originally. Then I have another selective color layer with reds tweaked, so you can see it's brightening up a ton in his jersey before and after. And then I have this layer on top, which is set to color, where I just painted black anywhere that's supposed to be black and white. And what that's going to do is it's really going to get rid of the color cast that was on there. We did that a little bit with this curves layer, but this is going to get rid of the color cast completely. You can see his pants and anything, his legs that are a little bit blue. This is making it completely black. We're not going to save that. So we're back to the graphic. So we need AJ Green to be running on something. So I've got this layer that is him running behind. This is the floor. Let me get rid of some of this stuff. There we go. So this is just the floor that he was running on that I masked back in here. And then I have another layer on top to extend this area so it's extended throughout the whole thing. So that's just behind him. I then took the Cincinnati Skyline and I clipped it out so it's clipped out all the buildings. So I've got the skyline here set to screen with a gradient map on top of it. So it's just black and white. And you can see it's a small edit on the gradient map. But I think I have that and I duplicated it twice just to have sort of this, you know, texture of the city below his head, above here. I just felt like there needed to be something there. So then on AJ, I have a couple other curves layers on here. So I've got one you can see that is brightening up, and it's just brightening up this spot here. I have the sort of same edge that we did on the other one. So this is just, we look like right here. It's adding a little bit of a glow all the way around him. And then I have a curves layer that you can see is darkening up everything. I thought it needed a little bit more contrast, so I darkened up the blacks on his jersey as well. And this has blend if applied to it. So you can see it's not affecting, it's affecting the whites in a gradient manner. So it's gradiating, I don't know. It's having a gradient from the lights to the darks. And then I have another layer on top of it that you can see here screened. It's just this bottom layer blurred, masked back to it. Just to add a little bit more of a glow, a highlight to this side, because this is where the light source is coming from. So then I have this lens flare behind him that I changed a little bit of levels on. So I just wanted to have a lens flare, and that's why I have that glow behind him, because this lens flare is leaking over the helmet, it's leaking around here. And what we have, so then we've got some more lighting. So I've got this lighting from the right that I have a levels layer on to make it less drastic, and I have a gradient map using the Bengals orange down here for the low end of that, and I have that on the left side as well with a levels layer just to show this big rainbow specular highlight. And I used a little bit of a camera raw filter on this. I'm gonna admit I don't know why. We're gonna open it up and we're gonna see what these settings are. So we've got the settings on here. I don't know why there's a camera raw filter on here. There's nothing in here, nothing in here, nothing there, nothing there. I don't know. Oh well, we've got one on there. So we've got some lighting there. So if I turn that off, turn that on, we're adding lighting from the top left and just sort of a highlight on the left side. And sorry, the light is from the top right. And then we need some other items. So then this area is up here. Area up here is a little empty. So I've got AJ Green text here, lowercase, just to be different. I've got a little bit of a shadow on here. This is just a Gaussian blur of it moved down. You could probably just use a drop shadow. I just did it this way, set to multiply at 66. And then I've got my small ass text here. And this is just some small ass text for texture that you can't even read, but that's the point. It's just supposed to be textural. But it's the Bengals re-signed AJ Green to a 1-year contract today. So this was right after he signed his 1-year contract with the Bengals for this season. So I've got that text there. Then lastly, we have a little bit of a lens dirt in front with a levels layer on top of that to add a little bit of depth. I've got 2 dust layers that add a little bit of dust effects in the front that you can see here without and with. Just adding a little bit of depth as well. And then a top selective color layer that is really boosting all of the orange everywhere in the graphic completely. So I tweaked the reds. And again, when you're using the selective color, so I wanted to make the reds more vibrant. So orange has red in it. So I dropped cyan because cyan is the opposite of red on the light spectrum. And I boosted the yellows and the magentas in that. And then the same thing with the yellows. Yellow, since cyan is almost the opposite of yellow, so then I can boost the magentas and yellows on that as well. So that's what it took to do this AJ Green graphic. It was a fun graphic to do. I've never done a graphic for the Bengals before, so I felt like doing it with AJ Green. Made this for a coworker actually. He kept bugging me to make an AJ Green graphic, so Andy, you are welcome. Let me know in the comments below if you learned something in this that you're going to use in your graphics from now on. Give me feedback if you want. Other than that, thank you for watching, and just make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks.